Okay, so I'm going to introduce our guest speaker today. Her name is Poppy Zurcher. We are very privileged to have her as a member of our church. Absolutely love this woman. Poppy is a daughter, a sister, and an aunt. She is a wife, a mother, a grandmother. Poppy is a 7-time cancer survivor whose attitude is always gratitude. Time magazine describes her having the most positive attitude. Coping with Cancer has written, if anyone needs a shot of courage and hope, seek out Poppy. The Johnson County Lifestyle magazine featured Poppy twice in their publications. Once after she was given the title, Most Inspirational Woman in Johnson County. Yes. And 8 months later, when they wrote of her, faith, hope, and courage. Poppy, on the other hand, simply believes she is blessed, and because of it, makes it a point to share her story with everyone who may be interested. Not for pity or woe is her, rather to hopefully touch hearts and have others also fight and be proactive in their health battles. She believes that we are blessed to bless others and tries doing this every day of her life. Please welcome Poppy Zurcher.
Thank you so much. I appreciate and love that all of you chose to come and hear my talk today. And as she said, my hope every time I speak is that I can touch one heart, that I can give hope to one person in the room. And then I know God still wants to use me. So for that, I'm very thankful. On a light note, I want to start out, have you played your game that's on the table? Well, I'm going to tell you what I did. We haven't played ours, but I just changed my phone cover yesterday. My father used to love finches, and I have so many that come on my deck. And the one in particular will eat and then turn around and face the family room where I sit. And if I ignore it, it comes to the window and pecks at me. So this picture turned out so pretty the other day that one of my friends here has it because I just love it. And then you're thinking that's my dad coming to see me. So that's why I have that. Ladies, I was born and raised in Greece in a time, can you hear me okay? Very hard. Is that okay if I hold on to the mic? I think that's right. That might be easier because I move around. Thank you. Is that better? All right. I started by saying I was born and raised in Greece in a time and in a culture where not being perfect when you're born is terrible. It's considered a curse. Well, I was a big surprise to my parents. I was their 11th child. There were only 8 of us in my lifetime, but Mom and Dad had 11. I was born when my mom was 50 and my dad was 57 years old. She thought she had some bad disease, but because they were poor and they didn't go to doctors, she tried to doctor herself, but kept getting weight on and kept getting sicker. And finally, the church ladies from our church took up a collection and sent her to see a doctor. Well, it's a small town and everybody knows everybody and everybody's business. And after the doctor examined my mom, he said, Athena, how many children have you had? And she says, well, 10. And he says, well, did you forget how you got them? And she was embarrassed by it because they don't talk like that. He says, well, I'm here to tell you, you're not sick. You're about to have number 11. Well, she was very embarrassed by it. What are people going to think about her having a baby at that age? Because 50 was old at that time. So then she thought, this is not a happy thing for me. This is going to be a curse. We can't afford another child. So no, Mama was not happy that I came along when I did. My dad, on the other hand, the whole town talks about it. He just rejoiced and told everybody that We're not having a baby, we're having a blessing. So to him it was a blessing before I was born. And some people even admit that they thought he was losing it because, come on now, you've got all these other wonderful kids. What's going to make this one so different? He says, I don't know, but I feel it in my bones. Well, all of us were born with the help of a midwife, because again, money was tight and people didn't go to the doctor. When Mom went into labor, there was no one around, and she didn't know what to do. My oldest brother, who was 23 years older than I, happened to come home unexpectedly. And Mom says, I don't have time to talk to you, you don't have time to eat, wash your hands and I'll tell you what to do. So he delivered me. And I'm thankful. They tell me that I was born wearing a smile. Can you imagine that? They said I was the happiest baby till about the time I turned 12 months old, and then all I did was cry. It was obvious I was in pain, but nobody knew why. Finally, Mom noticed that I had a mark on my knee, and she thought that maybe in turning or trying to crawl around I got hurt. Ignored it. Didn't even tell my papa about it. But this mark was getting bigger and bigger, and it finally covered my whole knee. And it became an open sore to where you could almost see the bone. Again, she kept it from my dad all this time. Parents during that time were not the lovey-dovey parents that we're all used to here. It was a hard life, everybody worked. As long as the children were taken care of, that's all they could do. I don't remember sitting on either parent's lap and being told I was a loving little child. Not because I wasn't loved, but that was the culture. So when the sore became so bad and I became so terribly upset and crying all the time and feverish, Mom decided she better tell Papa about it. He looked at it and he said, we need to talk to our priest. So they went and talked with him and they said, we don't know what to do. God wouldn't have given us a child at this age just to take her from us. What can you do to help us? He said, I'll talk to the ladies of the church and see if they can fundraise and get some money going to send her to the doctor. So they got enough money put together for me to be seen at Children's Hospital in Athens, Greece, which at that time was about a 3.5, 4-hour drive. It's now 45 minutes. But you're talking dirt roads and not like it is now. Well, the money afforded my mom and I to ride in the back of an open truck for those 3.5 hours to go to the doctor. There was no money for my dad, and the men do the business, not the women. So he hitchhiked to meet us there. We got there, and about 3 days later, he was going crazy because we didn't know anything, I guess. And finally, the doctor came out and said, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're wasting your money coming here. This child will never walk. And if she does walk, she's not going to live long enough. So just take her home. The only thing we can do is maybe amputate the leg. Mom cried, but Mom always cried. And my dad got angry. And he says, don't you go telling me that. Do you know how old I am? Do you know how poor I am? And do you know how much I do for my community and my church? God would not punish us by giving us this child just to take her from us. You're not going to cut her leg. Do what you can to save her. Well, the only thing they could do was remove bone. Every time anything happened, they would cut some more bone off and send me home. There was no money for medication, and 72 years ago, there were no treatments, at least not in Greece. So they would take me home for Mama and Papa to take care of me and keep me as comfortable as they could. All I remember is the pain, till now. When I was about 4.5 years old, my dad was a man of all trades. His main job was being a deep sea fisherman, and then when that was not in season, he would do catering. He was an exceptional cook and baker, and a man of many talents. But when he and Mom would work together on a job, they would take me with them, and she would put a blanket on the dirt floor wherever they were, so they could keep an eye on me while they worked. They heard a crash, and Poppy had found her way to a table leg, and I stood up. and they said I was about 4.5 years old. But in standing up, I pulled the tablecloth and knocked everything off. Mom got furious, didn't pay attention to what I had done, but she got furious at the damage. And I guess my dad picked me up and started dancing up and down. I told you she's blessed, and I told you she'll be fine. Well, it didn't stop then, because again, cancer kept coming back, and more bone was being taken away. They tell me that when the days were bad, you could hear me blocks away, crying. But again, not much to be done. When Papa would come home at night, he would always come in the room, especially when I was sick, and sit on my bed. I never remember him asking me how I was doing. I never remember him saying, "Do you hurt again?" or "How do you feel?" Instead, he would sit and tell me about his day. And he got my mind off of what I was thinking. This one particular night, he was stretching and he was tired, and he said, "Oh, if only you weren't so little. If only you didn't hurt so much." And I was just listening to him. And he says, "You know, if you weren't hurting so much, you could help me. I have to bake all this bread for tomorrow morning, and I'm such an old man and so tired, but you could help me. That's okay, the time will come that you will." Well, I adored him, and I said, "Well, Papa, I can help you now." "No, you can't." He says, "You're so little you can't even reach the table, and you're hurting." Now, I'm not hurting that much, but he knew. Well, I convinced him, I guess, that I could help him if he showed me how. Now, mind you that my first 5 siblings and my mom and dad never went to school, so we had nothing in writing. All the recipes were up here, and unfortunately, most of all my cooking and baking is up here. So you had to watch and learn. So he would assemble all the ingredients, and he'd pick me up and put me on this board that he had on top of sawhorses, because we didn't have a big enough table. And he'd say, "Okay, I need the flour, that's the flour, or I need the baking powder," or whatever he needed. And he says, "Now we're going to measure. And you have to remember, we can't make a mistake. This is a 1/2 cup, and 2 handfuls is 1 cup. Don't let me make a mistake." Well, I thought I was helping him, and I would repeat everything he told me. He wasn't teaching me how to make bread. He was teaching me how to focus away from my pain and keep this mind busy. Finally, I got to where I had memorized all the steps, and every time we bake bread, I'd say, "Well, now can you do that, and I'll bake the bread. And I'll do the kneading." And he would let me. Of course, he went back to fix things up, because I wasn't kneading it as well as a little girl, but I didn't know that. Then one day he said, "I have an idea." I said, "What's that, Papa?" And he said, "Well, I used to be so hurt because nobody called my name. Everybody had a name. And I still get emotional. My name was the crippled child. And I would get so mad. I thought, no, my name is Poppy." But nobody would use that name. So my dad said, "I'm going to take your bread to market tomorrow. And I'm going to tell everybody my little Poppy made it. And people will eat it and love it, and they'll say, 'Little Poppy made this bread,' and they won't call you crippled anymore." And it worked. I'm almost 72, and when we go home to visit, family of the people that have now passed, but the story has stayed in town, will come to welcome us. And they always say, "How's your leg?" They want to see the leg. You know, we hear about little Poppy's bread. Are you going to make any while you're here? My bread is not that special. It's the idea behind it. So he taught me the greatest lesson in my life, focusing away from the pain, something I try to share with people that I meet who are going through critical times. We can lay in bed and hurt and cry and blame and do whatever. Or we can get up and get busy and make ourselves do something. That something doesn't have to be monumental. That something doesn't have to be an attention getter. What works for me is doing something that I promise to somebody, because it holds me accountable. Because then I can't say I don't feel like doing it, because I know they're expecting it. and that keeps me going. I began working before my 7th birthday, baking bread and baking pastries for a wealthy family in our town. About a month after I started working for them, my boss lady came to me and said, "Little Poppy, I need you to go to such and such stores for the ingredients that we'll need, because we'll need to make new things. We're expecting special friends to visit us from the United States of America." And I went, "Are they cowboys or Indians?" Because that's all I had ever heard about America. And she says, "They're neither, they're just very nice people." And I thought, then they must be the people that always are dressed up and they drive cars. How exciting this is going to be. So we went and I bought everything I needed to make the food. And then she said, "I want you to be very kind and very nice to them like you are, but I don't want you wasting time. I want you to stay in your place because you are the worker." Well, my place was working at an outdoor hearth stove. We didn't have indoor facilities. They all had hearths. I would begin work between 4:30 and 4:45 in the morning by burning the wood and getting the coals ready, so by 6 or 7 I could start putting the breads and pastries in. My one leg was almost 4 inches shorter than the other from all the surgeries, so definitely I dragged the leg. And I used to have a cloth bag like the bags we now buy to put groceries in. And this bag would have 3 bricks. And I would carry it with me, so when I went to my job, once I assembled all my ingredients, then I would put my 3 bricks down and put my short leg on it so I could stand and do my work. Their friends arrived, and they were such delightful people. I was nervous about meeting them because I thought, they're just going to look at my leg and I'll be the crippled girl to them too. But they didn't. I learned at that age that smiles and hugs are the same in every language. You don't have to say anything else. Just a sincere smile and a hug did it for me. Well, it was obvious that they liked me and I liked them. They didn't speak any Greek and I didn't speak any English, so we hugged every time and we smiled and waved. When it was time for them to leave and come back to the States, they came to see me one morning when I was outside working, and they gave me a candy bar that's like a fisherman, this big. But it was this big, and it was a musketeer bar. I had never tasted candy before. I couldn't believe that I was that special to them that they would give me a whole candy bar. And then I thought, "Poppy, they didn't give you the whole candy bar. It's probably take a bite and give it back." So I took a knife and cut a little portion and gave it back. Then they said, no, it's for you. And I just cried because I thought, my goodness, was such a gift. Well, what I didn't know was that they were more than liking me. They had been asking my boss all about me. And the boss told them that I came from a very good family, a very poor family, and that we all had to work. And the lady said, "But that's child abuse, isn't it? Look how hard that child is working in her condition." And they said, "Well, it may be child abuse in America, but here it's child survival. She could be a tramp, she could be a thief, she could be a gypsy, but no, she's hardworking like all the kids in the family and like her parents. And on Sunday, you know where you're going to find them, the whole front of the church." They said they look like the Greek. So they kept getting doors slammed in their face, but they would come back and visit every year and always look me up. Even though they didn't always come to stay with their friends, they always came to see how I was progressing. 2 of the 4 times that they came, I was hospitalized with more surgeries, and they came to the hospital. We couldn't believe it. When they brought me home, they, my boss, and the local mayor who spoke English all showed up in our humble home. And I say humble because we had 2 rooms for that whole family. And the rooms had a cord that went around like a rope and tarp, and at night they would close it and they would divide it so we could each have privacy for sleeping. That's how we grew up. But here they showed up, and in one way I was so excited to see them. Because boy, to tell people that these American friends came to see me twice was so special. But I was asked to leave the room, and I thought, oh, that's not fun. So I went out, and I'm thinking, now, wait a minute. My boss is with him, and the mayor is with him. Maybe I did something and I'm going to lose my job. Oh, will that be a disgrace? First, I'm a curse to my mom, and I have all these health problems that my poor family can't deal with, and now I'm going to lose my job. Where is God when I need him? So my dad came out and he said, we still love you, but this is adult business we want to discuss. Just go out and say your prayers and we'll be done. I said, oh, I gave up praying. He says, you did what? I said, I gave up praying. Why would you do that? And I said, Papa, he doesn't listen anyway. You tell me he always listens and he always answers our prayers in his time, but I'm still hurting and they're still cutting on my leg. Why pray? And I remember him hugging me really tight, and it was a gloomy day. He says, close your eyes and listen. What am I listening to, Papa? He says, just listen. Well, Papa, all I can hear is birds singing. And he says, and it's dark out, isn't it? I said, so what? Your faith should be like the birds. They sing when it's still dark. And it didn't make much sense at that time, I'll be honest. But it makes a lot of sense now. Don't pray when things are going great. Don't pray when things are bad. Pray at all times. And I've learned that, and that has brought me to where I am today. Because if that faith of mine is not what it is, I'm telling you from my heart, I would not be here today. Doctors have given up on me, and we've proved them wrong. I tried to listen in the dark. So he went back in. It was quiet. I tried to eavesdrop. But every so often I could hear my father's voice, and it was not a happy voice. And my dad was a happy man. Finally he came out. He said, now you can come in. And I thought, whoa, I wonder what happened. So I went in, and my American friends smiled at me, and I smiled at them. And I sat down, and my father said, the reason we're talking is about you. And I thought, oh, okay, Lord, step in. I don't want to lose my job. He says, these folks have been taken by you. And the only way they can help you is if they take you away from me and take you to America. And I want to see how you feel about it. And I said, well, what am I going to do in America? Well, they seem to believe that there are doctors that can help your leg and stop your pain. And they also want to send you to school. I don't know why you need to go to school. Women don't need schooling. I said, so I'll learn how to read books. And the American lady was in tears, and her husband was, equal emotion. I said, well, that sounds wonderful. Well, that was not what my father wanted to hear. And he said to me, well, good, I'm glad you think it's wonderful, but we're not going to make a decision today. We're going to wait till you're a woman. And I went, Papa, have you looked at me? I am a woman. He says, no, you're a child. And I said, then why do I do woman's work? If I'm a child, I do everything women do. He says, it's the end of the subject. We're not going to discuss anything till you become a woman. Well, how long is that going to take? I didn't know what that meant, because in Greece you don't talk about certain things. So every day I'd go to work, and I would pass this one store with big windows, and I'd look and see I looked the same. I never changed. I don't know when I was going to change. And then the time came, and I was 13 years old, 2 years later, and I was sicker than anything all night long. But I was so grateful, because it was a Saturday night, and Sunday my sister and her husband were going to come to spend the day with us. And she was my only sister, and she's almost 17 years older than I am, so she was like a mom. Well, when she arrived, I hugged her, and I said, I need to talk to you. And we went around the back, and she goes, where are we going? I said, you have to promise me you're going to keep my secret. She said, what kind of a secret? I said, well, I'm never going to America. She says, you never know. Why do you say that? I said, because I'm dying. She says, you're dying. What happened? I didn't know you had to go back to the hospital. I said, no, I'm dying. I was bleeding all night long. She says, you were? I said, yes, and it hurt both my tummy and my back, and she's kissing me and calling me her little woman, and oh, she says, you're just a beautiful little woman, and kissing me. I said, no, wait a minute. Woman, is this what we've been waiting for? She says, well, yes, and I said, why? She says, that's what happens when you grow up. I said, well, I don't like it. When is it going to be over? She says, well, sometime when you're in your 50s. I said, you're kidding me. Well, she taught me how to take care of myself, because I knew nothing about all this. And then I waited until I turned 50. And she says, and don't forget, we don't talk about this to anybody. This is just something in the family. I said, who would want to talk about this? Don't worry, I'm not going to say a word to anybody. 2 weeks later, it was our turn to go to visit her, and they had a donkey that I used to like to ride. So her husband came to lift me, to put me on. I said, no. He says, you don't want to go for a ride? I said, no, thank you. So he tells my sister, she must really be in pain. She doesn't want to ride him. So my sister came up and she says, why don't you want to ride the donkey today? I said, you know. She says, still? I said, well, I'm not 50 yet. She never told me it would stop and start, you know? So that was my education into womanhood. Well, she might have told me not to talk about it, but somebody definitely did, because the American couple showed up. And I thought, who told them? So they said, you know, they told us their secret. They were never lovers. They were never in love with each other. They're just dear companions who traveled together and did things together, but not in a romantic fashion. When all the doors kept slamming in their face about helping me, the gentleman's best friend from high school was at the time the congressman in Ohio, where they were from. And they were having dinner with him one night, and he said, I found a way that you can help this little girl. Listen to me, I know you don't want to, but if you two were to get married, I could help you legally adopt her and bring her here. So they talked. 3 days later, they got married. On the day that they got married, they were notified from the parents that I'm a woman. And they took their honeymoon, if you will, to come to Greece and start the proceedings. And 6 weeks later, we came to America. When we were at the airport saying our goodbyes, my dad had disappeared. My mom came up to me, and she was a woman of few words, because again, remember, it was a curse. But she stuck something in my hand and squeezed it tight. And she says, you know, you're leaving. I don't know if I'll ever see you again. But whenever you need a mother, talk to Jesus and ask him to share his mother with you. And I had an icon of the Blessed Mother in my hand. Whenever anybody comes into our home, there's an icon of the Blessed Mother in every room. My reminder and my strength. Coming to America wasn't the easiest thing in the world, obviously. I didn't realize just how hard it would be. It didn't hit me till the airport. And I saw my dad walking, so I went up and I said, Papa, I want to talk to you. He says, we don't have time. The plane's going to leave any time. And I said, I want to talk to you. If you ask me not to go, I'm not going. He says, I'm not going to ask you to do that. I'm giving you your life. Go and continue blessing us. So that's how I left home. And then he says, oh wait, I forgot. So I turned around and thought, good, he's going to tell me not to go. She put some money in my hand. Ladies, I had never touched money. When you work, you get paid with hand-me-downs, with leftover food, with maybe flour, with things for survival, not money. Well, he put money in my hand, and I thought, for me? And he says, yes, I want you to hide it. And when you go to America, if they mistreat you or harm you in any way, you use this money to contact me, and I'll come get you. Well, I didn't realize just how much money I didn't have. He gave me the equivalent of $30. But that was a lot of money, and it's still with me. With a note for my children to know what it is. So I came to America. I fell asleep in the car coming from Columbus, Ohio, where we landed, to outside of Canton, Ohio, where my new home was. And when I woke up, it was dark. There was a star revolving, and I thought, they do have cowboys and Indians. Because it said sheriff. It was a sheriff's office. And I knew the word from having seen it in pictures. Well, it wasn't cowboys and Indians. I was disappointed. They introduced me to a dictionary. It was a Greek English dictionary, and the three of us each had one. And that's how we communicated, because they didn't speak Greek and I didn't speak English. They would say, for example, table, and I would repeat it. And then they would find it in the book so I could see what the Greek word was. So for 2 months, that's how we became close. At the end of 2 months, I had my first doctor's appointment. And I could semi-communicate. Well, they wouldn't let Mom in the room. I guess it was planned, but I didn't know. And when the doctor asked Mom to leave, he said to talk with me, and they had an interpreter. And he said what a lovely little girl I was. And he says, I like the way you take care of yourself. My hair was down below my hips. And I said, well, I should be cleaned. People here like to wash. I came, I said, from dirt roads and dirt floors, and I mean, we got dirty. We washed at night, but we really cleaned ourselves Saturday night before we went to worship on Sunday. Here, they make me get into this big thing full of water to my neck, and I have to do this every night. I hate it. I tried to get out of it, thinking I could sneak, because I wasn't dirty. Why get in there? So I would run the water and swish it with my hands and say that I took a bath. But Mom was smarter than me. My towel was dry, the soap was dry, the bath mat was dry. She knew I didn't take it. So finally she introduced me to a shower. One of the guest bathrooms had their own bath and a shower. And she said, would Poppy like this better? I said, yes. So I would go there and take my shower. But I didn't know the word for shower. I only knew it the European way. So when the doctor was saying I was so nice and clean with my hair and all, I said, at least I don't have to get in there to wash. Now I take a douche every night. It got his attention really fast. And he says, you do? And I said, yes, sir. He says, and where do you get this? I said, my mother. So the translator went out of the room, and next thing you know, Mom comes in, and she smiled at me and rubbed my face, and she says, did you tell the doctor that I give you a douche every night? And I said, yes, ma'am. Why would you do that? I thought, she's crazy. Why won't I? And she says, but I don't give you a douche every night. I said, yes, ma'am. In the bedroom downstairs? She didn't know what I was talking about, and I couldn't tell her anymore. She says, will you show me when we go home? I said, of course. It was a quiet ride home. We get there, and I thought it was over with, and she says, no, come and show me where you find this douche. And I thought, what do you mean where I find it? So we went downstairs. I turned it on. She said, shower. I said, douche. So She looked up in the dictionary. In Europe, it's called a douche. Then she told me what a douche was, and I was like, oh. Well, around I came to the United States in February. In middle of April, we went to the Cleveland Clinic to start seeing doctors about my leg. I had my first American surgery there, and reconstruction, where they put rods and they extended my leg. So part of my leg is not mine, and part of it is. I call it all mine. But not speaking English, not knowing what they were doing to me, only experiencing the pain. Chemotherapy was rough. I lost my long, beautiful hair, and I didn't know anything about that. All I know, I was gone and sick. But being taught ever since I could remember that you will not cry in public. Only weak people cry. And if you cry, you will never get a job. You will never get married because they'll look at you as a sickly person. I kept it all inside. And I was the person that Lynn was reading in her book, giving other people strength, but not being able to receive it. And finally, one day I broke down. I couldn't take it. And my mom and dad left the room, and they came back to introduce me to Mr. Lang. It seems before they brought me here from Greece, my adopted dad had taken him aside and said, promise me before I give her to you, that when she gets really sick and in a lot of pain, you will give her work to do. And they thought that he was being cruel, and they said, no. That's how I've taught her to cope with her pain. Promise me or she can't go with you. So when they saw me break down, they thought this was the time. Mr. Lang was an English teacher from the local high school who they hired to teach me English. Some days he would come and work with me a half hour, some days 3 hours. But by October I was speaking English and I was able to start school. I was on cloud 9. It was the best gift in the world to go to school. As I got off the bus, an older boy came up to me and said, are you Poppy Jenkins? And I said, yes. He said, they need you in the office. I said, where is this? And he told me. So I went to the office, and the lady behind the counter was busy typing, and I said, good morning. Yeah, I'll be with you in a minute. Finally, she never looked at me, and she said, so what's up? I thought, oh, it's the first test, and I'm looking. 32 squares with many holes and 11 long lights. She says, are you being a smart aleck? I said, oh no, ma'am, you're mistaken. My name is Poppy. Well, I was speaking English. I wasn't speaking slang that everybody else speaks. So I was in for a big surprise. But I loved school. I was welcomed. I felt at home. And I considered it another gift from God. My adopted parents kept their promise as far as keeping me connected with my real family. Every Saturday I would write a letter, give it to my adopted mom so she would make sure I wrote, and would mail it to them. I went to college, but not to a school that my parents had chosen for me. They had chosen Ohio State University and the University of Florida because I was a linguistics major and they really offered everything I needed. But I was so unhappy, almost as unhappy as when I left home. And finally I thought, they can't read your mind. You gotta tell them how you feel. When there was a problem in our family, my adopted mom would say, well, let's have a cup of coffee and a piece of pie and we'll talk about it. We never talked without coffee, something to drink, and pie. So this one day after school I said, Mom, Dad, could we have a piece of pie and something to drink? I need to talk to you. And they were surprised, but they said, sure. And we sat down, and I was fighting my tears because I thought they would be ashamed of me. I said, I don't want to go to school where you want to send me. And they were both so surprised. And they said, well, why not? I said, I already left home once. I don't want to leave again. I had found another school I think I would like better. It's only 47 miles away from here, and it offers exactly what I need. Well, ladies, what I didn't know was that was the beginning of becoming a Presbyterian. It was a Presbyterian college, and I didn't even know that. Well, as soon as I mentioned the college, my dad stood tall. He was a Presbyterian. And he said, well, of course it will be a wonderful school for you, and Mother and I can come visit you as often as we can. The whole time I was there as a student, they came every other Sunday. We'd go to church together, have lunch, and then they'd go home and I'd be at school. It was a win-win for me. Well, the biggest win is I was the only freshman in a senior Spanish class. A particular senior decided to transfer all his credits and move from Penn State University to this small college. God enters. This senior was Bob Zurcher. And Bob Zurcher became my dearest, closest, and best friend. He was almost a replacement for my younger brother. The brother was only 6 years older than me. I shared everything with him that I had never shared with my own parents. My pains, my worries, my concerns, and my joys. And he did the same. I was dealing with my cancer with my leg, and he was angry with God because he was losing his 47-year-old father to leukemia. So between the two of us, we really bonded. But the year was coming to an end, and he was going to graduate. And Vietnam was going strong. And he decides to tell me he loves me. And I'm going, well, yeah, I love you too. He says, no, I love you and I want to marry you. I said, well, I can't marry you. He says, you can't, why not? I need to go to school. I'm going to let down my Greek family, my adopted parents. I just can't do that. Oh, but if I wait, you'll marry me? I said, well, sure. Almost 52 years later, we're still best friends, and I adore him. Well, because of Vietnam, he decided to go and join the Army as an officer. So, since we were talking about being married, I said, you know, I'd like to get married in the Greek Orthodox Church. Would you mind? He says, I will marry you in front of a Jewish rabbi or a Christian, priest or pastor. So I said, well, maybe we ought to meet them now, because when you're gone, I don't know when we'll be able to come back. We went through all the steps that the church required and planned to be married 3 years later. Except I had enough credits and they graduated me early. So when he called, he used to call every Sunday night. I said, I get to graduate this year. He goes, there's no way. And I said, I've got all the credits I need. I focused all my energy in my schooling and overdid it. I'm an overachiever. But my pain was lessened because of it. So he said, well, wait a minute. If you're graduating this year, which was a year later, do we still have to wait 3 years? I said, well, no, I suppose not, but you still have to ask my parents' permission. You're kidding. I said, no, that's how I was taught. So as soon as he was able to come home, he got my parents' blessing. And then I said, too bad you can't meet my real mom and dad. You would love my daddy. Well, as it turned out, my adopted parents surprised us and brought him over for the wedding, so I could have both my fathers walk me. So I'm telling Bob this. I said, guess what I just found out? They're bringing Mom and Papa over for the wedding, so you're going to get to meet them after all. He says, well, maybe I will and maybe I won't. He has a very dry sense of humor. And I said, this isn't a joking matter. You're going to get to meet them. And he says, I know, unless I get hijacked. Ladies, this was in 1970, where just about every other week a plane was being hijacked. Do you recall Pan Am flight that went from London to Ireland for 4 days? My parents were on it. Bob still mentions it and says, oh, honey, I didn't wish it on them. I was just trying to make light of it. But Mom cried the whole time, I'm told, and Pop was entertaining everybody with his hand gestures and trying to communicate. Then they came around to give Gideon Bibles to anybody that was interested. My dad couldn't read, but he saw the cross on the book and he figured it was a prayer book. So he put his thumb over it so Mom would know. And she says, well, what's that for? He says, it's America. It's probably their menu. Don't worry about it. She believed him and stopped crying. Well, they arrived and the wedding went off. Wonderful. And then off we went to our first military assignment. The doctors had been advising me not to get pregnant because they said, if you survive your pregnancy, the baby probably won't, or vice versa. Since I had bone cancer so badly, my pelvis would not stretch, and they feared for the worst. And I said, you know, why don't we leave it in God's hands? I'm not going to actively try, but if God wants me to have a child, I'll do what my parents did with me and give it the best I can. 2.5 years later, we had our first child. We had a little girl that came 2.5 months early and weighed 2 pounds. She's now 50 years old. Kimby knows her. Young, healthy, wonderful, and our blessing. 2.5 years later, her brother came along. He made me pay for it, but he was worth it. He also is a very healthy and is a very healthy young man. And I've had trouble with my bones ever since, but God is still keeping me here. And I'm not planning to go anywhere anytime soon, I hope and pray. I've had cancer 7 times. Since my marriage, I began with cancer again 3 years after our marriage. Bob has been my rock. It's always, we can do this. It's always, we're fighting together. He never said, I'll help you fight it and he can do it. It's always, we can do it. And we've been able to, with God's grace and help. And the love from friends and pastors. Bob said, I think we need to go and check out Kimby in her church. And I thought it was Easter, my favorite holiday. So we came. The very first people we met were Leon and Vern. How could you not have somebody more hospitable than that? And then this little lady comes out of nowhere, Paula. And then every other time we came to visit, if not both of them, one of them would come up, I'm so happy to see you again. The whole congregation. We came because of loving Kimby, but we got love from all of you. Every one of you has sustained us and loved us. So we're at home, and I thank you for that. The problems I've been dealing with the last 6 years have not strictly been cancer, but they are the side effects from cancer. My bones are giving out. I've had to have my spine wired with a monitor to control the pain. I've had to have my bladder completely reconstructed from cadaver parts. 2 new shoulders, 1 new ankle, 1 new wrist. And as of this year, a brand new stomach. What the doctors call my newborn. It's something that is not successfully done, but they were able to build me a new one from a cadaver. That's why I didn't enjoy the food that these wonderful ladies prepared, because I'm just learning to eat again. But I'm here. We didn't know what the first month would be like. Second month was supposed to be even more critical. It wasn't a happy time, but I was here. And I've learned I don't have time to feel sorry for myself, because there's always somebody that has it worse than me. And maybe I can reach out to them and forget about my problem. And if that didn't happen, maybe focus on doing something for others, because that's how I was taught. At my most critical times, I would make things and promise them to someone, as I told you earlier. Anything from doing 200 blankets for Children's Mercy in a 9-month period, to scarves that we sold at church. The ladies of the church would say, I'll do it, you don't have to. And the money would go to either Cancer Action, who is done strictly by volunteers, or the cancer research program here in Kansas City. Our son was getting married, and on Christmas Eve morning, 19 years ago, the doctor called us in. That didn't bode well. Why would they call you on Christmas Eve morning? So Bob and I went in like little kids, squishing each other's hand. And the doctor knew. And he said, unfortunately, I don't have good news. And we called you in this early on the holiday to make it even more special for you, because it will be your last one. They gave me 2 to 3 months to live. And I got mad. The Greek girl came out. That means I forgot English and I want to ramble in Greek. And finally I said, I can't believe you're doing this. How dare you call me here on Christmas Eve morning? Do you know how busy I am? He says, did you hear what I said? I said, and do you know how busy I am? I'm not going to discuss it anymore. I'm going home. Poppy, and I'm walking out of the clinic. My husband comes behind me, and he was lost. And I said, I don't want to talk about it. It's Christmas. We're going to go home. We're not going to tell the children a thing. We're a small family. And we're going to enjoy Christ's birth. We'll talk about this afterwards. And Bob said, whatever you want to do. Okay, of course it was on my mind, but I refused to face it. I called the Cancer Hotline when I had a little time alone. I had heard a lot about them, and I thought, maybe they can tell me something. The phone rang and rang and rang, and finally a man answered. And he said, how can I help you? I couldn't talk. I said, I don't know. He said, well, you called. You must have something to ask. I said, well, I just found out yesterday that I'm terminal. Really? Like a bus or a train? And I said, I'm sorry, but this isn't funny. He says, well, it is when you say terminal. Who on earth knows what terminal is? Only God in heaven knows that. I thought, I like this man. He says, let me tell you about me. He never asked me a question. He says, let me tell you about me. My name is Richard Block. And I have started the Block Cancer Hotline. I was told I was going to die 17 years ago. And for the first 5 years, doors were closed and they were saying there's nothing else to be done. I found a young resident in Los Angeles that said, sir, it's an experiment, but you've got nothing to lose. Can we try it? And I'm still here today. Has anybody talked to you about a clinical trial? I said, no. Well, you don't have time to talk to me, Missy. You go back to that doctor and ask him to tell you about a clinical trial. And oh, by the way, when you beat this, I said, well, if I beat it. And he goes, when you beat this, would you become one of my volunteers? I said, yes, I will. So after the new year, we went back in to see the oncologist, and I said, before you say anything, yes, I was sick. Yes, I didn't feel well. But why haven't you talked to me about a clinical trial? He says, it would ravage your body. I said, oh, it would kill me. He says, yeah. Cancer is killing me. What's the difference? At least let's try it. He goes, Poppy, no. I said, isn't it up to me to make the decision? And Bob is squeezing my hand like, don't push it, you know. And he finally said, don't leave me. So I said, I'm not going anywhere. I was mad and ready to fight. He says, well, first of all, if you're going to do this, we have to put some weight on you. Because I had been losing a lot of the treatments. And Bob says, well, good luck, because it's not working. He says, then it's up to you. He says to me, he says, yes, you're going to see to it that for the next 6 weeks, she will only eat boiled pasta and boiled potatoes. I thought, pasta, potatoes, that's up my line. I like that. Nothing on it. And drink 16 ounces of the starch. He gets old, let me tell you. I was in bed and I would pretend I was asleep because every time I opened my eyes, there was a spoon in front of me, and Bob would say, "Just one more bite, honey, just one more bite." Our pastor would call and say, "Is there anything we can do? The people in the congregation wants to know what they can do." But I was isolated because of infection. I said, "No, there's really nothing." So one day I said, "There is something." "Good, what can we do for you?" I said, "Invite Bob out for lunch and then take him to a long movie." "Is there a problem?" I said, "He feeds me every time I open my eyes." I gained the 40 pounds they wanted me to gain, and we went through the clinical trial. I made it to my son's wedding. I've gotten to have 2 grandchildren. And then 5 years after that, nationally, they made me the poster child, if you will, Cancer Survivor of the Year. And in celebration of that, that's when my sister made the national dress that I'm wearing. So I've chosen to wear it whenever I speak in honor of God's grace and the love I have around me. The Cancer Hotline, if you don't know anything about it, is wonderful. It doesn't tell you what to do, but it helps you ask the questions that you don't know what to ask. I have brought 2 books that Mr. Block and his wife Annette have published. They're so, so helpful. I get cases of them every month that I share with churches and with people going through this struggle. The blue sheet of paper that's on the table are questions that I encourage everybody to take. They are questions to ask your doctor if you or your loved one finds out that you have cancer. Because so many times we hear, "I don't know what to ask. I've never been through this before. I'm scared." Get that paper and read it in front of the doctor and get those answers before you make a decision. But the best thing you can do is don't sit home to think about it. Once you find out, put your pain behind you and move forward. Find the doctor you trust, the doctor that can help you, and do something about it. Because it's been proven, ladies, and I'm here to show you. If they catch it early, they can help you. So don't let a loved one or yourselves be short, with your life. It's a gift that God has given us, and it's up to us to maintain it. So please feel free and take it. Another organization that is very, very dear to my heart is Cancer Action. Have any of you heard of it? It was established here in Kansas City by 2 ladies who had both battled cancer, who had both struggled because they didn't have the means to buy what they needed to pay for their treatments. So from their garage, they started collecting things that people gave them to help other patients. Now it's become quite a big deal. It's the only place in the United States that has it, but they help people all over the United States and now Europe. I've become one of the volunteers only because I heard about them through the Cancer Hotline when my niece ended up with cancer back in Greece and she couldn't get anything that she needed. And Annette Block said, "Well, honey, why don't you go over to Cancer Action? They'll get you what you need." I couldn't believe it. They wouldn't take money. They gave me bras for her, undergarments for the tubes, for the drainage, everything she needed, and kept saying, "Too bad we can't send the nutrition she needs to her." So I said to the Lord, every time I have the opportunity to talk about them and send people to them, I'll do what I can to help. So when I speak, and anytime people want to give me any type of a present, I say, I will accept it, but I want you to know it's going straight to Cancer Action. Because it's handled by volunteers, and they do so, so much good. If you don't know about them, think about what I just said. I do have some pamphlets that talk about all their wonderful services, and they welcome people to stop in and say hello and tell you more about it. I want to thank you for this opportunity. As we said in the beginning, it's not something that I talk because I want pity or that I want to bring attention to myself, But because I grew up in a culture where you don't talk about it, because it's considered that you're cursed if you have this disease, and then in later life, if it comes back, you don't know what to ask the doctors because you don't know where you've been, so you don't know where you're going. I want to make sure that people are aware of what is happening so they can get help. You're not there to cure them and to provide answers. You're there to care and listen and tell them what you've dealt with so maybe they can take and move on. The jewelry that you see behind me is not a hobby. As I told you, I've always undertaken things that I could do, and then when I sell it, I give proceeds to help others. I started with the cookbooks that I've published. First one when my son got married, and he said, "Mom, would you write down some of our traditions and recipes? Because my wife has never made coffee." And I said, "But you know how to do this." But he's a diplomat at the State Department, and his hours are long, and he said, "I won't always be home to do the cooking." So Bob would put the laptop on my chest, and whether I was in the hospital or at home, when I couldn't sleep, I would write down recipes and stories, never dreaming that we want to publish it. Long story short, it got published, and the publisher said to us, "So how many copies would you like to start with?" I said, 50, 75? And he laughed, and he said to my husband, "She's quite a character, isn't she?" And I thought, what was so funny about that? He says, "Oh, minimum order is 1,500. I said, "We're new to Kansas City. We don't know that many people. So do you want to publish it or don't you?" "Okay, we'll do 1,500. I never dreamed it would sell more than maybe 50. It's been printed and reprinted 11 times. And it's still being sold. Second one came when the bones decided to break in my legs, and I was with my leg out for 6 months. And the publisher said, "You know what, your first book has done so well, would you consider doing another?" And Bob said no. And the phone was behind me in this house, and I said, "Honey," he doesn't shout at me or get angry with me very often, but he hung up the phone, he came up to the bed, and he goes, "What?" And I said, "I can do this." And he goes, "You can't even stand up. I have to carry you to take you to the bathroom. How are you going to make a cookbook?" I said, "I'm laying here for 24 hours. Give me something to do." So that's how the second book came around. The publisher was so thrilled, he said, "If we can get it out in time for Christmas, I will pay for the cover. And I'm going to send a photographer to the house to take a picture of the table with food and such." I said, "How wonderful." Bob said, "No." I said, "Why not?" He says, "And how are you going to do that? You can't even get up." And I said, "You can help me, huh? We'll tell the photographer one picture only. One shot. If it works, great. If it doesn't, and what about the food? When I'm nervous or I'm stressed, I cook and put things in the freezer." I said, "Go to the freezer, I'll tell you what to bring out." He set the table, and he says, "And your shorts on top?" And I said, "Go upstairs in such and such a closet and bring me a dressy top. They're not going to see me from waist down." It was a hospital shorts. "Honey," I said, "I know. So ladies, you need to look at this cover." My oncologist encouraged me to tell the story. My husband's mortified, so no, you didn't hear it. He is under the table holding my tush while the picture is being taken. So if you make up your mind, you can do wonders. Proud of it. I stopped giving the proceeds to the cancer hospital at KU, which is a research hospital, because the last time I went to give them my, I thought, wonderful donation of $1,500, which was not bad for a little cookbook. I get off the elevator and there's cameras and people there, and Richard and Annette Block were there. So I went up to give them a hug. They had just donated $11 million. So, "Poppy, what are you doing here? This is wonderful to see you." I said, "Well, I had to come and say thank you." I I went in to see my oncologist. I said, well, I'll give you a hug and then I'll leave. And she said, honey, what's wrong? I said, well, I came with my donation, but 11 million and 1,500. She says it takes each dollar to get us a step forward. So she welcomed it. And that's when I turned all my donations over to Cancer Action, who don't get that much money, and help them. Thank you. God bless you. And if I can only ask you one favor to be thinking about. If you have a loved one that is going through terrible struggles, and you go to visit him or her, please be mindful of what you say. We listen to every word we hear, especially when we don't feel well. There's nothing worse than having somebody you love look at you and say, oh, and your beautiful hair, is it ever going to grow back? How long has it been now since you lost it? 6 years. But I have pretty hair. Or, well, at least you have a good appetite because you're putting on weight. You don't know what the treatment is. Not everybody with breast cancer, for example, has the same breast cancer as your friend, or the same treatment. Don't do comparisons. If you don't know what to say, just say, I'm so glad I got to see you. Maybe we can do it again. That's the only favor I have, because it's something that lives with us. I thank you, and I thank you for all that you do for me and friends that are dealing with this disease. Thank you.